Princess Celestia gazed out from the highest tower of the royal palace, her golden eyes reflecting the sun's fading light. The view was breathtaking. Mountains stretched as far as the eye could see, the rivers winding like silver ribbons through the valley below. Yet, despite the beauty of her home, a heavy weight pressed on her heart. She had been raised to rule, trained to be a leader of their people. But as she grew older, something inside her began to stir, something that didn't quite match the expectations of royalty. She was the only child of King Oros, a mighty ruler who commanded the respect of many planets. The royal bloodline ran strong in her veins, and her future was already decided by her father. She would be queen, a ruler who would continue the kingdom's legacy. There was no room for error, no room for doubt. But for all the privilege that came with her status, there was something missing. Love. The kind of love that went beyond politics, beyond duty. She had often heard stories of great queens and kings who had married for power, never for love. And now, her father, King Oros, was pushing her toward such a marriage. The pressure weighed heavily on her. He had chosen a suitor for her, a prince from a distant world, powerful and influential, someone who could secure their kingdom's place in the galaxy. The match was perfect, at least on paper. But when Celestia thought of the prince, her heart did not stir. There was no spark, no connection. Each time she saw the prince, she felt nothing but emptiness. He was kind, respectful, and well-mannered, but their conversations felt rehearsed, as though they were following a script rather than getting to know each other. She couldn't imagine spending the rest of her life with someone she barely knew. Yet, the king was insistent. He believed that she had a duty to their kingdom. He had always told her that royalty came before personal desires. The kingdom's future depended on alliances, on forging powerful marriages that would strengthen their rule. And in his eyes, Celestia had no room for personal choice. But Celestia was not like the other princesses from distant planets. She was different. While the others seemed content with arranged marriages and living out their lives as figurehead queens, Celestia longed for something more. She wanted a life of her own, a life where she could choose her path. The thought of marrying a man for duty, not love, filled her with dread. One evening, as Celestia sat in the royal gardens, a soft breeze tugged at her hair. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, trying to clear her mind. It was then that she heard a soft voice from behind her. "Your Highness," a man's voice said, calm and gentle. Celestia turned to see Jack standing there. He wasn't a prince or a nobleman. He was a human, a visitor to her world, sent to the palace on a diplomatic mission. He wasn't tall or imposing, but there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip a beat. His deep brown eyes were kind, and his smile felt real. Unlike the prince her father had chosen, Jack did not treat her like royalty. He treated her like a person, someone with thoughts and feelings, not just a symbol of the kingdom's future. "Jack," Celestia said softly, her voice filled with a quiet longing. She had met him several times over the past few months, and each time they spoke, something inside her felt awakened. "How are you, Your Highness?" he asked, his voice warm. "I am well, Jack. But I find myself troubled," she admitted, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "You have many responsibilities, don't you?" he said, stepping closer to her. "You are a princess, after all." Celestia nodded slowly. "Yes, I have been taught since I was young that duty is everything, but what if there is something more? Something beyond duty?" Jack didn't respond immediately. He seemed to understand, his expression softening. "You mean love?" he asked after a moment. Celestia's heart fluttered at the word. She had never spoken about this to anyone before. "Yes, I have been promised to a prince for the good of the kingdom, but I do not love him, and I fear I never will." Jack's face softened with empathy. "I can't imagine being in your shoes, but I believe love is not something that can be forced. It should be something that comes naturally." Celestia smiled sadly. "I wish it were that simple." "You deserve to be happy, Celestia. Jack said quietly. Not because of your crown or your kingdom, but because of who you are. The words hung in the air between them, their weight not lost on either of them. Celestia felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she had never felt with anyone else. She realized in that moment that Jack had become someone she could trust, someone who didn't view her as a princess, but as Celestia, a woman who wanted to be loved for who she was, not for what she represented. But her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. It was one of the royal guards approaching them. "Your Highness," the guard said, bowing deeply, "the king requests your presence." Celestia's heart sank. She had been so absorbed in the moment with Jack that she had forgotten about her royal obligations. She turned to Jack, but before she could say anything, he gave her a reassuring smile. "Go," he said softly. "Your duty calls. But remember, you are not alone. You deserve to choose your own happiness." Celestia's eyes lingered on his for a moment, longer before she turned and walked toward the palace, her heart heavy with the choices ahead of her. Princess Celestia couldn't stop thinking about the conversation she had with Jack in the royal gardens. His words echoed in her mind, especially the way he had said she deserved to be happy, not because of her crown, but because of who she was. That night, as she lay in her bed, she wondered if it was possible to choose love over duty, to live a life outside the cold, calculated decisions of her father, King Oros. The very next day, after the royal breakfast, Celestia found herself once again alone in the grand hall of the palace. Her father had spent most of the morning discussing strategies for expanding their influence across the galaxy with his advisors. It seemed that the future of the kingdom was always at the forefront of his thoughts, leaving little room for personal desires. But Celestia had reached a turning point. She had to speak with Jack again. As soon as the opportunity arose, she slipped away from the palace unnoticed, making her way to the hidden corner of the city where she had arranged to meet him. It was a quiet, peaceful place, far from the eyes of the royal court. The sun was setting as she approached the small garden where Jack had been waiting for her. His face lit up when he saw her. "Celestia," Jack greeted her with a smile. "I thought you wouldn't come." "I had to," she replied, her voice tinged with both excitement and fear. "I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation last night. I needed to see you again." Jack stepped forward, his eyes full of warmth. "I'm glad you did. You don't have to apologize for wanting to be happy." She paused, feeling a rush of emotions. "But that's the problem. I am torn between my duty and my heart. My father wants me to marry the prince from Talanos, someone who can help strengthen our kingdom. He believes it is the only way forward for us, but I don't feel anything for him. How can I marry someone I don't love?" Jack's face grew serious as he took her hand in his. "You can't be forced into something that doesn't feel right, Celestia. I know it's hard, but you deserve more than a political marriage. You deserve someone who sees you for who you truly are." Celestia felt her heart race at his words. For the first time, someone had truly understood her. Someone who saw beyond her royal title and the weight of her responsibilities. But the fear that gripped her was still there. Her father's expectations were not so easily dismissed. He had spent his entire life building the kingdom's strength. He would not let one rebellious decision tear it all down. "I wish I could just leave everything behind, Jack," Celestia confessed, looking away. "But I can't. My people depend on me. My father has worked so hard to keep this kingdom safe. I can't be the one to ruin it." Jack squeezed her hand, drawing her attention back to him. "You are not ruining anything, Celestia. You are just choosing your own path, and you don't have to do it alone. Whatever you decide, I will be here for you." His words made her feel both comforted and terrified at the same time. How could she choose between the kingdom and her heart? Could she really walk away from everything she knew to be with him? A human from another world, a man who had no power or status in her royal court? "I don't know what to do," Celestia admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Every time I think about the prince, I feel nothing. But when I think about you, I feel something real, something that I can't ignore. But what if my choice tears everything apart? Jack gently lifted her chin, making her meet his eyes. What if your choice brings you true happiness, Celestia? What if the kingdom can still be strong, even without a political marriage? Love doesn't have to be a weakness. It can be your greatest strength. The words sank deep into her soul. She had never thought of it that way. For the first time, she began to see a path forward, a path that didn't require her to choose duty over love, but one that could combine both in a way she had never imagined. She could still be a strong leader, but she didn't have to sacrifice her happiness to do so. I don't know if I'm strong enough to make this decision, Celestia said quietly, her voice trembling. What if my father disowns me? What if my kingdom turns against me? Jack's grip tightened, giving her a sense of strength. You don't have to do this alone, Celestia. I'll stand by you no matter what happens. Together we can figure it out. A long silence passed between them, and for the first time, Celestia felt like she had a future, where she could follow her heart. She wasn't sure what the next steps would be, but she knew that with Jack by her side, anything seemed possible. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Celestia knew she had to return to the palace. Her heart felt heavy, but a spark of hope had been lit. It was terrifying, but she knew that whatever happened next, she couldn't deny the love she felt for Jack. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough to change the future. I have to go, Celestia said reluctantly, pulling away from Jack's embrace. But I'll think about what you said. I'll think about us. Jack smiled softly. I'll be waiting for you, Celestia. You don't have to face this alone. With one last lingering look, Celestia turned and made her way back to the palace, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in her life, she felt as though she had a choice. And that, in itself, was a kind of freedom she had never experienced before. Princess Celestia returned to the palace that evening, her mind swirling with the words Jack had spoken. The decision to follow her heart felt like a distant dream, one that seemed impossible in the face of everything she had been taught. The weight of the crown on her head seemed heavier than ever, and the responsibility she felt for her kingdom was suffocating. That night, as she walked through the grand hallways of the palace, her father's voice echoed in her mind. King Oros had always emphasized the importance of duty over personal desires. To him, love was something that could be sacrificed for the greater good. But for Celestia, the words felt like chains that bound her to a life she didn't want. Didorain. Next morning, as the sun rose over the kingdom, Celestia was summoned to the royal council. Her father, King Oros, was waiting for her in the great hall, his face as stern as ever. His advisors, men and women of great influence, stood in a circle around him, all watching her as if she were a prize to be won. Celestia, King Oros began, his voice low and commanding. We have matters to discuss. She bowed her head respectfully, though her heart was heavy with dread. She knew what was coming. I trust you've had time to consider the proposal of Prince Zoran, King Oros continued, his eyes narrowing slightly. His kingdom is strong, and his alliance with us will secure the future of our people. I expect your answer soon. Celestia stood still, feeling the weight of her father's expectations pressing down on her chest. She could feel the eyes of the advisors on her, waiting for her response. Her mind raced. She wanted to tell her father the truth, tell him that she could not marry a man she did not love, that she wanted to choose her own path, but the fear of disappointing him, of shattering everything he had worked for, held her back. I have thought about it, father, she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady, but I cannot marry Prince Zoran. A tense silence filled the room. King Oros's face hardened, his eyes blazing with anger. What do you mean you cannot marry him? He asked, his voice sharp like a knife. This is not a choice, Celestia, this is your duty. You have a responsibility to our kingdom, to our people. You cannot throw that away for some foolish fantasy. Celestia's heart raced, but she forced herself to stand tall. I do not believe in a marriage based on duty alone. I want to marry for love, Father. I want to choose someone who sees me for who I am, not just for my title. King Oros's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Celestia feared that he might lash out. The air in the room grew thick with tension. She knew that her father's love for her was deep, but his sense of duty was even deeper. In his eyes, she was the future of the kingdom, the one who would carry on the legacy of their people, and he would not allow anyone, least of all his daughter, to jeopardize that. Love? King Oros repeated, his voice a low growl. You think love will protect the kingdom? You think love will keep our people safe? This is not a fairy tale, Celestia. This is real life. The prince is a powerful ally, and your marriage to him will ensure the stability of our rule. I cannot allow you to make such a foolish decision. Celestia's heart sank. She had known this would be difficult, but hearing her father's words, seeing the anger in his eyes, made her doubt her own conviction. How could she go against him? How could she defy the man who had always been there for her, the man who had sacrificed so much for their kingdom? You have no right to tell me what I can and cannot feel, Celestia said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. I will not marry someone I do not love, Father, and I will not live my life according to your plans. I want to make my own choices, even if they are difficult. King Oros's face grew darker, and his voice became icy. Then you will leave this kingdom, he said coldly. If you refuse to fulfill your duty, then you have no place here. You will no longer be the princess of this kingdom. You will no longer have the privileges of royalty. The words hit Celestia like a blow. She could feel her legs weaken beneath her, but she refused to let herself show weakness. She had made her decision, and she couldn't turn back now. I understand, Father, Celestia said quietly. If it means that much to you, I will leave. But I will not live a life of regret. I will not live a life dictated by duty alone. I choose to follow my heart. For a moment, there was only silence. King Oros stared at his daughter, his face a mixture of disbelief and anger. Celestia held her ground, not daring to look away. She knew the consequences of her decision, but she also knew that she could not live in a world where her heart was silenced by duty. You will regret this, Celestia, King Oros finally said, his voice low and dangerous. But know this, you are not above the kingdom. You are not above your people. If you walk away from your duty, you will lose everything. With those words, he turned and left the room, leaving Celestia standing alone. Her body shook with the weight of her decision. She had chosen love over royalty, but now she had to face the consequences. She stood there for a long time, thinking about what to do next. She could leave, as her father had threatened, but would she be able to find happiness outside the palace walls? Could she truly build a life with Jack, knowing the price of her decision? As the door closed behind her father, Celestia felt a mixture of fear and freedom. She had made her choice. Now, she had to live with it. But no matter what happened next, she knew that she had followed her heart, and that, she realized, was something worth fighting for. Celestia wandered through the palace after her conversation with her father, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and fear. King Oros's words echoed in her mind, and with each step, the weight of her decision grew heavier. He had threatened to disown her, to strip her of everything she had known, and part of her wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. But another part of her, the part that had been buried for so long, told her she couldn't live like this anymore. Her mind kept returning to Jack. He had shown her a glimpse of a life where she wasn't just a princess, a title, a duty to her people. He had made her feel like she was more than the crown on her head. For the first time, she had felt free. Free to be herself. And that feeling had ignited something deep within her, something that could never be put out. Still, leaving her father's kingdom behind was not an easy choice. King Oros had been everything to her, her protector, her mentor, the one who had taught her the importance of sacrifice. His love for her had always been apparent, but it had always come with conditions. His love came with the expectation that she would be the perfect heir to the throne. that she would follow the path laid out for her without question. But the path he had chosen for her was not one she could walk. The heavy weight of the royal life pressed against her chest as she approached her private quarters. She paused outside the door and hesitated. A part of her wanted to go back to the council and apologize, to beg her father for his understanding, but another part of her knew that would never work. She couldn't be the person her father wanted her to be anymore. She entered her room and stood in front of the mirror staring at her reflection. The gown she wore, embroidered with silver thread, was beautiful, but it felt like a costume, something that hid the real Celestia beneath it. She no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. This woman was a princess, yes, but she was also a prisoner of her father's dreams, and for the first time, Celestia knew she could no longer wear the crown. Not if it meant sacrificing everything she truly wanted. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. She turned around, surprised to see one of the palace attendants standing in the doorway. "Your Highness," the attendant said respectfully, bowing. "Your father has asked for your presence in the throne room." Celestia's heart sank. She had expected this. She knew that her father wouldn't let her go without a final confrontation. She nodded quietly, preparing herself for the inevitable. As she walked toward the throne room, her mind raced. She had made her decision, but she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. The throne room loomed ahead, grand and imposing, a symbol of the power that her father held over their world. She had spent her entire life here, growing up under his watchful eye, learning from him, watching him make the decisions that shaped their kingdom. But now it was time for her to make her own decision. When she entered the throne room, King Oros was sitting on his throne, his face stern. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment, their eyes locked. There was a tension in the air, thick and heavy, as if the very fate of their kingdom hung in the balance. "You've made your choice, haven't you?" the king asked, his voice low but firm. Celestia nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "Yes, father. I choose love. I choose Jack. I cannot marry Prince Zoran. I cannot live my life according to what you want for me." King Oros's expression hardened, but there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. "You do not understand what you are giving up, Celestia. The future of this kingdom depends on the strength of our alliances. If you marry Zoran, our kingdom will be secure. But if you follow your heart, you risk everything. Your people will turn their backs on you. They will see you as weak, as someone who cannot fulfill her duty." Celestia took a deep breath. "I understand the consequences, father, but I also know that I cannot live in a world where I am nothing but a figurehead, a symbol of power. I want to live a life that is real, that is mine. I want to love someone who sees me for who I am, not for what I represent." The silence in the room stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, King Oros spoke, his voice tinged with regret. "You are my daughter, Celestia, and I love you more than you know. But you must understand that I cannot allow this. You cannot leave the palace, not like this. I will not have my only heir run away with a man who has no place in our world." Celestia's heart tightened in her chest, but she stood her ground. "I am not running away, father. I am choosing my own path. I cannot marry a man I do not love. I cannot live for the kingdom alone. I need more than duty. I need love." King Oros stood up, his towering figure casting a shadow over her. He looked down at her with a mixture of sorrow and anger. "Then you leave me no choice. If you leave this kingdom for a life of love, you leave your responsibilities behind. You will no longer be my heir, and you will no longer have a place in this palace." The words stung like 1,000 arrows. Celestia's breath caught in her throat. "So, you will disown me?" "Yes," he said coldly. "If you choose this path, you will leave everything behind. Your title, your future, your place in this kingdom. You are no longer my daughter in the eyes of the crown." Celestia's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She had made her decision. "I will leave, father. I will follow my heart." With those final words, Celestia turned and walked away, leaving the throne room and the life she had known behind. She knew there would be consequences, but for the first time she felt a sense of freedom. She had chosen love, and that was a choice she could live with. As Celestia walked away from the palace, the weight of her father's words still lingered in her mind. She had made the decision to follow her heart, but the road ahead was uncertain. She had given up everything, her title, her royal privileges, her future as the queen of the kingdom. In exchange, she had chosen love. But would it be enough? Could she truly build a life with Jack, away from the grandeur and power of the palace? Her mind drifted to Jack. He had always been kind to her, seeing her as more than just a princess, treating her like an equal, like a person with hopes and dreams. The love they shared was real, not some arranged match made for political gain. Jack had been the one person who had made her feel alive, like she had a purpose beyond the walls of the royal court, and now he was waiting for her. As she made her way through the city, the streets seemed different. The people she passed no longer saw her as the princess, the future queen. They saw her as just another woman, another person walking among them. It was a strange feeling, one that made her heart race with excitement and fear all at once. She was no longer bound by duty, no longer a symbol of her kingdom's future. She was free to make her own choices, to live her own life. After what felt like an eternity, Celestia reached the small cottage where Jack was waiting. The familiar warmth of the home, the simple furnishings, and the scent of fresh flowers filled her senses. Jack was sitting by the window watching the sunset, his face soft with anticipation. When he saw her, a smile spread across his face. "You came," he said, his voice filled with relief. Celestia nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. "I came. I'm here, Jack. I've chosen you." He stood up and pulled her into an embrace, his arms wrapping around her like a safety net. For the first time in what felt like forever, Celestia felt at peace. She had left behind everything she had ever known, but in Jack's arms, she felt like she had found something even more valuable: true happiness. As they sat together watching, the stars began to fill the night sky. Celestia knew that this was just the beginning. She had made the hardest decision of her life, but it was the right one. She had chosen love, and that was a choice she would never regret. The future was uncertain, but with Jack by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next.